Welcome back to part 3 of the shit show that is my Formula Drift career. I'm fresh off of Drift Week 2, in which I released a 14-part video series which goes over the trials and tribulations of doing such an event in only ways that I can, aka breaking literally everything and spending every penny that I had to do it. But hey, it was a good time. And because of that, I know I got a lot of new subscribers and or people that are watching the channel, so thank you guys very much for joining in. This show here is kind of my staple of my channel. I do some how-to videos, I do some event videos, and I do Drift Week coverage when I can, but this is kind of the meat and potatoes, and I release them, try to release them, I guess I should say, once a week. And this is called A Scotch and a Beer with moi. Me, in case you don't know French. But this is basically a rundown of my entire drift history, going back from when I got my first 240SX, and even before that I got my first ride-along that got me into drifting in the first place, and all the way up to doing pro, quitting pro, and it will go beyond that until it catches up to my current life. And kind of everything in between. There's a lot of good little nuggets if you're just starting drifting. Lessons to be learned so you don't have to do things the hard way like I did. So if you got some time, put it on. It's more like a podcast than anything else. I just film it and put little video clips and so on and so forth in it. It's kind of a good time. Check them out. Now, that being said, my whole Formula D career was documented by the admirable and wonderful Jesse Wood. The man, the myth, the legend. And they can be found on the YouTube channel as well. They were back from 2014, and they documented each and every single round of Formula D I went to. Now, keep in mind that these are the sunshine and roses versions of what actually happened at FD. I tried to stay as positive as I could for those. You can kind of tell in my facial expressions and my voice and my choice of words that I wasn't super happy. And yeah, give those a look. I'm going to put that link up here, I believe. It's probably on the other side, but whatever. Now, before I get into the actual story, I always have a scotch and a beer for this particular show. And I just kind of explain my thoughts on it and then go on drinking those throughout the episode. And that's just kind of how this goes. So, without further ado, this is the scotch and a beer section of Scotch and a Beer. Now, for the beer, and it's appropriate because Kevin White will be introduced in the next video after this one. When I was on Drift Week, Kevin gave me a 4-pack or a 6-pack of Kentucky Bourbon Barrel Ale. So technically a whiskey, which is sick. Thanks, Kevin, aka Blinky, for said barley pops. Let's give it a try. Super sweet, and my God, it's 8.2% alcohol by volume. This is basically a barley wine at this point, but that is a fantastic flavor, and thank you very much, Kevin, for that. I forgot my glass, God damn it. Now, for the scotch, this was kindly gifted to me again during Drift Week. Thank you guys so much for giving me the alcohol. It makes me feel like an alcoholic, even though I'm not. Most of these bottles that you see here I have had for years. So I treasure this stuff. When I get into a certain mood, I drink a certain scotch. So it takes me a really long time to go through one bottle. I'll usually have it for 3 to 4 years. So that being said, Philip Bommarito, he let me store his trailer in New Orleans and went out and hung out with us, showed us some cool spots on Bourbon Street, was at the event, and is an all-around rad dude. Came up and gave me some Macallan 12-year Sherry Oak Cask Edition Scotch. The color is a rich gold. The aroma is complex with hints of vanilla, dried fruits, and ginger. The palate is smooth, medium balanced with fruit, oak, and spice, and the finish is long with sweet dried fruits, oak, and spice as well. Oh my God. Thanks, buddy. I'm going to enjoy the living hell out of this. Drift Week was a difficult time for me. It was a really expensive time for me. So this is a good way to drink away those sorrows. I'll give myself a hefty pour because I'm probably going to need it for this episode. And the first thought that comes to my mind is fall, like in a forest, walking around with the leaves and that very, very specific scent where it's kind of just in between winter and just in between summer, which means fall. Strangely. God. Anyway, it smells kind of like that. It's super spicy. You can definitely smell that, so let's give it a taste. Oh, that is sweet and delicious. My God. It is hard to get a bad Scotch, which I have definitely had. This one is horrible. Don't ever buy this one. It's Trader Joe's something year. This is fantastic, especially during the fall, which it is right now. This is a great fall Scotch. Thanks, Philip. Much appreciated, bud. Now that it's been way too long, onwards to the actual story itself already. Thanks, Dan, for doing that. You know, that's kind of the point of what I'm doing here. Now, I had just gotten back. It's day one from coming back from Formula Drift Long Beach, which was a devastating experience for me in so many different ways. Like, other than not totaling the car, that was one of the only positive things that came out of Long Beach. That's how good it was. 50% of my team had basically quit. I just didn't know it at this point. And with them would go a lot of the perks, which kind of came with them being on the team. And that's what I'm going to go over now. Now, not only did I lose my fabricator and the team manager, I lost the ability to fix the car if I did hit a wall, fabrication-wise. I lost the place to actually work on the car if I was to hit a wall or break something. My motor build, my 2.8 RB stroker motor was in a machine shop that kind of Luigi was spearheading, and now because he wasn't talking to me, that was in limbo. The place that I was supposed to be working on, storing, and keeping the car at was Factory Edge, and that was all because of Keith, which was now probably gone. On top of that, I was supposed to borrow Keith's trailer for Formula D. It was an enclosed like 32 foot. It would have been absolutely perfect for what I was trying to do. And now that was probably out the window as well. And the reason why that is important is because once the car left for the East Coast swing, there was Atlanta, there was Florida, there was Jersey. There would be basically 3 events before the car came back to New Mexico so that we could actually diagnose, fix, put the new engine in, etc., etc., etc. So keeping it somewhere that wasn't on an open trailer, which is all that I had at that point, wasn't going to work. It had to be an enclosed because it would be away from me for months at a time. So, yeah, I'd really screwed the pooch in Long Beach, and all of that stuff would come back to haunt me very, very badly in the next couple of weeks. On top of that, I was in super panic mode because I couldn't get a hold of these guys. Like, they were justifiably not talking to me at this point. So the plan after we got back from Long Beach was to fix the boost issue that we were having. Basically, the boost controller was set to be on the high kill boost setting first when the car was turned back on, and I was so overwhelmed with everything that I always forget to turn it up, which is turning it down to the next setting, which was the low boost setting, which is the one I should have been on. So every time I'd turn the car off, I'd forget to do that, and ended up costing me a qualification run. So that was on the chopping block. The steering issue that we had, where it was locking up at a certain point, that needed to be addressed. And we were supposed to get the motor back from the machine shop and put the 2.8 liter stroker motor in to have that ready for the rest of the tour. So because, like I said, we wouldn't be able to get back to the car for another basically 3 months after it left for Atlanta. It's 2 weeks after I'd gotten home. I still hadn't heard from Keith. I still hadn't heard from Luigi. The car hadn't been touched. It was just sitting in my garage doing absolutely nothing. I didn't have any of the tools to actually do anything to fix it. Like, I was just kind of like, oh man, this sucks. I don't know what to do. This isn't working. I mean, they had justifiably blacklisted me. I was reaching out, I was texting, I was calling, I was leaving drunk voicemails. Nothing was working to get a hold of these guys, and I was really, really, really starting to get worried about everything because I still didn't know that they had quit at this point. Atlanta was less than a week and a half away, and all I needed was some closure. I just needed closure. I just needed to know 100% I need to get my stuff out of Keith's shop, or I'm not going to use his trailer, or anything. I just needed to know answers, and I wasn't getting any because they weren't talking to me. Okay, so it's now a week before I'm supposed to leave, and Keith finally gets a hold of me. He lays into me, and kind of basically, I'm going to boil it down to, he told me that I wasn't serious enough about what we were doing. I was focused on the people outside of the team. I was focused on girls. I was focused on this. I was focused on that. I was focused on partying, and I wasn't taking what we were doing seriously. Where in my mind, that was kind of a huge part of everything that we were doing, is that aspect of stuff. And I really wanted that to kind of be ingrained in what we were doing, because if it's not fun, I don't want to do it. I, again, didn't communicate that to them, of course, but to me, that is a huge part of drifting, is keeping drifting fun. I was in that video. That video is very, very important to why drifting is drifting, and I didn't want to lose that. The moment you lose that, drifting doesn't become fun anymore. And I want everybody to remember that. Don't ever take it too seriously, even in Formula D. I mean, you can, if that's your MO, but to me, that wasn't. And so I think it was kind of a two-edged sword. Like, I wasn't mad that the car didn't work, but they were mad because I was focused on other things. So it was, to me, I was confused as to what was going on, and I figured we could work things out, but that wouldn't be the case. He let me know that he wouldn't be moving forward with the team, and going forward, I wouldn't be able to use his trailer. I would have to get all my stuff out of his shop. He said I didn't have to do it then. He wasn't mad at me. He said we were still going to be friends. Like, I appreciate Keith. Thank you so much for everything you did for me. It was a lot. And he said he would try to get a hold of Luigi for me and get him to reach out because I really needed to know the status on the motor. Okay, so no trailer and no place to house and or store the car. That's okay. It's going to the East Coast for 3 months. I can work something out in the meantime. At least I have answers to those. Again, a week before I'm supposed to leave. So no bad blood with Keith. He's just not on the team anymore. Appreciated that. So at least I had somewhat of a game plan at this point. I now had to find an enclosed trailer before I was supposed to leave and a place to actually work on the car for after I came back. I was basically out of money outside of everything that I had already budgeted. Like, I had a very strict budget for everything. I had a diesel budget, I had food budgets, I had budgets for every single round that we went to, and they were very, very, very tight. Like, there was no dollar that could be spent extra anywhere else, or I would quickly run out of money and just not be able to do stuff, which really came back to bite me in the ass later on for New Jersey. So I ended up having to screw over yet another good friend and good person. I'm sorry that I had to do this, but I kind of had no choice. So rewinding, I had just gotten serious about drifting. Andy had just swapped the RB into the car, and I was looking to go travel. Like, the guys that came down from Colorado got me into drifting, and then traveling was what I always wanted to do. Like, I didn't want to just stay drifting in New Mexico. I wanted to leave and go other places and meet other people, and that I sold my STI, and I bought a truck and a trailer. So Andrew McGibbon, a fellow drift guy who was a super, super good autocrosser and is to this day still a good autocrosser, decided he'd help me out. He had an open trailer he was getting rid of, and he sold it to me for the low, low sum of $800. Now, he also said that he got first dibs if I ever go to sell it, plus any enhancements I'd made to it. And I said, okay, thanks. And I used the living crap out of that trailer, bringing it down to Las Cruces, went to Phoenix a few times. It was fantastic. Loved that little guy. Got great mileage in the truck. But anyway, that's a different story altogether. Since I was currently in panic mode, I had a week to go, I didn't have a trailer, I got on Craigslist, there wasn't anything local in Albuquerque because it's Albuquerque and we don't have a lot of stuff like that, so I had to go to Phoenix. I found one in Phoenix for $5,500 and the guy said he'd take $5,000 if I could come get it the next day, and I said, sick, let me go to the bank and see what I can get. The only personal loan that I could get was for like $3,500, which didn't quite cover the rest of the trailer. So there was no way that I was going to get this trailer, and I couldn't find any that were cheaper that I could actually realistically get to and back with time to leave for Atlanta. So here's where I made yet another bad choice. I didn't give him first rights to the trailer, as even with improvements, new tires, new wiring, new lights, I wouldn't have been able to sell it back to him for over $1,000. Like, that just wasn't gonna happen, and that left me $500 short for getting the trailer from Phoenix. So I did what any other dickhead would do, and I ignored the fact that I was supposed to give him first rights and sold it to somebody for double the price I paid for it, being $1,600. So having that in my pocket, I was able to use the loan plus the $1,600 with $100 for diesel money to help get me there and back, and I was able to go get that trailer and bring it back to Albuquerque the next day. I'm super sorry about that whole situation, Andrew. Every time I see you, I just feel horrible. He's still a good friend of mine, so appreciate you being a good sport. But that is the actual reasons as to why I had to dick you over. And I'm sorry, bud. So it's now 3 days before I'm supposed to leave for Atlanta, and Luigi finally reaches out to me, which blows my mind. He sends me a couple of text messages, really lays into me about how he built a winning chassis and I should have done better and I should have been more focused on the team instead of focused on other stuff, and a laundry list of things that really upset him, and I absolutely understand it, and I'm sorry, Luigi, that I made you feel that way. That was never my intention. Believe me, I would have much rather had you guys on the team for the rest of the season than to alienate you and make you feel like you couldn't be around me anymore. So, sorry, bud. I did not mean for that to happen. The good news about that was he gave me the name and number of the guy for the machine shop that had the motor, so I was actually able to go pick that up before we left. Now, they didn't do anything to it, so that didn't help at all. So there was absolutely 100% no way that that motor was going in before we left for the East Coast swing. So I basically had to default to being on a stock motor with a crazy built head and a huge turbo. Now, it was also at this point that we brought the car over to Motiva to have my buddy Scotty switch the boost controller from being high boost as the default setting and the low boost being one click up to the low boost being the default setting and the high boost being one click up. So that I wouldn't forget to do that every time. So that was part of the plethora of issues that we were experiencing, but huge thanks to Scotty and Motiva for taking time out of their busy days to make that happen. Which is fine. The car was still making like 550 to 600 horsepower, and it still felt good. It still felt like it was powerful. I was just literally slower than everybody else on the grid. Part 3 of the puzzle was finally a closed chapter 3 days before I'm supposed to leave. All 3 of those things were out thanks to my selfishness and attitude towards everything that was happening. Rookie mistake. Learned that the hard way. So I packed up my truck and I headed to Phoenix. That morning at like 4 a.m. left, got to Phoenix, picked up the trailer, signed all the paperwork, drove all the way back to Albuquerque the same day. I believe it was a Friday. And on the road to Albuquerque, Matt Field calls me up and he's like, yo, me and Chris Mills are rolling through, in a very NorCal accent, probably used a couple of hellas in there, and said, yo, we need hella track time to test our rigs. Sorry, no, I'm just kidding. Can we head out to Sandia and give it some testies? And I was like, yeah, dude, sure, no problem. Called Charlie up on the phone and I was like, hey, Charlie, we hella need some track time for these hella sick dudes to get some stuff in. And I also need to test my car because we're still having steering issues. So Charlie said, yeah, That Saturday we went out to the track and we got some sick laps in. I couldn't keep up with Chris, and I know he was having a bunch of issues that day, so sorry for him. Matt's car ripped and I couldn't keep up with it at all, but I was able to keep up with a dual overhead cam KA S13 driven by Keith. So that was good news. At least I could tandem with a car with 1/8 my horsepower. At the track, we tried many different things. I tried new tie rods, I tried new tie rod ends, I tried basically everything we could to try to get the car to turn right, but it kept locking up at random times and we could not figure out why it was doing this. Could not figure it out. Matt's a PBM expert, he's been on PBM for forever, and we couldn't figure it out. So at the track, changed all this stuff, borrowed a bunch of their parts. So thanks to Daniel Chow and Matt Field for letting me use some of their spare PBM stuff. And it just still felt off. Randomly during transitions, I would be able to not transition back the other way and I'd spin out. And it was just like, all right, something is still seriously screwed up. We thought it was the rack. So I had ordered a new rack the day I got back from Long Beach, and it still wasn't here. So there was absolutely no way a new rack was going in. So we were gonna have to kind of just work around that in Atlanta, which sucks because I wanted to drive Atlanta so badly. And it was looking like it was going to be a complete shit show when I got there. And it ended up being a shit show, but we'll get to that in the next episode. The next day, it's Sunday. We bring the car over to Aoki's house because he actually has a decent set of tools to work on it. We're in Aoki's driveway working on my Formula D car, and we cannot figure out the suspension stuff. Like, we have it completely jacked up. Everything feels good. The rack feels good, like when it's up in the air. Matt can't figure it out, and we make a few adjustments, we give it some more toe out, and we're just like, well, we're just gonna have to send it. That's all we can do. Everything felt fine in the air. I don't know what's happening. So we put the car back on the ground, we put it in the trailer, head to my house. Matt Field, Daniel, and their crew all stayed on my couches, and we were gonna head out early Monday morning to leave for Atlanta. And yeah. Now, surprisingly enough, Aoki had stayed on the team despite the best efforts of Luigi and Keith to convince him to quit, which he absolutely should have, because I would go on to treat him like even more of a dickhead later on than you could possibly imagine. So thanks, Aoki, for staying on the team. Every little bit helped at this point. I had reached out to my buddy Andy Barrow, and he was able to go with me to 2 events. He couldn't do all of them, but he was able to go to Atlanta, and he told me he could go to Seattle. Like, he's a busy dude. He's running multiple different companies at once, so thanks, Andy, for actually being able to do that. That being said, we woke up early that Monday morning, and we took off as a caravan. It was just me and Andy in the truck. Jesse Wood and Aoki would be flying in to Atlanta. We'd pick them up later in the week because Jesse was still in school at this point, and Aoki had a job working at NM Imports. Now, keep in mind that it's a 30-hour plus drive towing a trailer to Atlanta from Albuquerque, and even longer than that for Matt Field. And at some point we got split up, and then we weren't together, and then we met back up at this random gas station in the middle of nowhere in Texas, and then we caravaned the rest of the way out to Atlanta. Thanks, Andy, for coming with me and driving probably more than half of that 37-hour journey is what I believe it took us to get there. But we got there, we picked Aoki and Jesse up from the airport. We set up our pits, and we hit the hay for a good night of sleep before paid practice that Thursday. And that is where I'm going to end this video. Stay tuned next time for the absolute horrors that was Formula D Atlanta. I have never come so close to just having a mental, physical breakdown. Like, I had a hard time not tearing up every time I think about it. It's brutal because that was the only track that I really wanted to drive, and I failed miserably. I think I got maybe 4 laps in total. Anyway, it was just a really, really, really bad time for me. So yeah, keep tuned in to the channel for the next Scotch and a Beer with Officer Dan, where I go over the actual Formula Drift Atlanta, where it was a rainy shit show and I failed miserably at everything. Anyway, this has been Officer Dan with Scotch and a Beer. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate each and every view you guys give me. Welcome to all the new guys once again. If you've stuck around this long, you're the real MVP. And I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Peace.